When I discovered my sister was pregnant, I heard my own mother whisper in the dark, "We can sell the baby and get rich." That night, I understood that monsters don't live under the bed. They sit at our table every day. Good morning, my dear friends. What a joy to speak with you today. I'm Laura Thompson, 72 years old, and I live here in Oak Ridge, a small town in rural Virginia. I was born in Appleton, Wisconsin, back when the world was quite different from what it is today. Time passes, wrinkles appear, but memories stay tucked away in our hearts, don't they? These days, even though I'm retired, I still see a few special patients. You know, my loves, I became an obstetrician. For more than 40 years, my hands brought children into this world, safely and with dignity. I've lost count of how many babies I've helped deliver, but each newborn's cry still moves me as if it were the first. The women in my town know me as Dr. Laura of the Blessed Deliveries, a title I carry with more pride than any diploma hanging on the wall. It was a choice born from pain, but blossomed into love. Each time I place a baby in the arms of a protected and supported mother, I feel like I'm healing an old wound, not just mine, but all of ours. It's as if each safe delivery is a small victory against a past that tried to destroy us. Early in the morning, before any appointments, I brew a strong coffee, the kind that only someone from the Midwest knows how to make, and I sit on my porch to watch the day begin. It's from here that I talk to you through this little device my grandson taught me to use. Who would have thought this old grandma would learn all these modern technologies? Life never stops surprising us. I began recording these stories after my sister Sophia passed away. God rest her soul. She always said our experiences could help other people, especially women and girls going through similar situations. At first, I was embarrassed, you know? But then I realized that silence only protects those who don't deserve protection. If you're watching this video, perhaps God put it in your path for a reason. If you can, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories from this grandma. Each subscription is like a hug I receive, and at this stage of life, there's nothing more precious than a sincere hug. And you, my loves who are watching me now, tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? During breakfast, after lunch, or already tucked in bed waiting for sleep to come? I read every comment with great care, and I'm happy to know there's a little bit of me in your homes. Today I'm going to tell a difficult but necessary story. A story about how monsters don't always have claws and sharp teeth. Sometimes they have the same blood that runs in our veins. It's about bonds that should protect, but instead suffocate, and about how, even in the darkest situations, we can find a path to light. It's the story of how I discovered that the family that should protect us was the same one that threatened us, and how my sister and I had to create our own definition of love and protection. I'll go back in time to that simple house in Appleton, Wisconsin, where Sophia and I grew up, where everything began, before everything changed forever. Appleton in the 60s, Appleton in the 60s. Oh, how I miss those times. Our house was on Maple Street, a simple house with time-yellowed walls and faded blue wooden windows. It was small, but for two girls like Sophia and me, it seemed like a palace full of hiding places and secrets. I was born in 1953, the first daughter of August and Dolores Thompson. Daddy worked as an accountant at the only bank in town, always in a suit and tie, even in the scorching heat of the Wisconsin summer. He was a respected man in the community, one of those who make sure everyone knows it. A proper man, the neighbors would say. He had deep-set eyes, dark as wells, and large hands that seemed to swallow anything he held. He rarely smiled, but when he did, it was more out of politeness than joy. Mom, Dolores, was a quiet woman, pretty, with long black hair always tied in a tight bun. She kept the house with almost military precision. A place for everything and everything in its place, she repeated like a mantra. She had only studied through elementary school, but could do math better than many college graduates. She controlled the family finances with tooth and nail, always worried about saving for hard times, as she used to say. Sophia arrived when I was 5 years old in 1958. I still remember the day I first saw her, so tiny and red, wrapped in a yellow blanket that Grandma Eulalia had made. "This is your little sister, Laura. You'll have to help take care of her," said Mom, with a look that I would only understand many years later. A look of someone handing over a burden, not a gift. And I did take care of her. From an early age, I was more mother than sister to Sophia. It was me who bathed her, combed her hair, taught her the first letters. Sophia was a girl with easy smiles and curious eyes, so different from our father's. She had golden curls that shone in the sun as if they had their own light. "Looks like a little angel," the ladies at Sunday service would say, and she would lower her head, embarrassed by the attention. Our routine was simple, like any small-town families at that time. We woke up with the first rooster crow, had breakfast with homemade bread and grape jelly. Sophia and I went to the town school, where we studied in different classrooms. I was always ahead, she always at the right pace. In the afternoon, we played in the dirt yard among the chickens and the blueberry bush that was loaded in the spring. We had few store-bought toys. I had a cloth doll that Mom made, patched up several times, and Sophia had a teddy bear she got from her godfather at her baptism. But we didn't need much. We made houses out of dry leaves, played hide-and-seek among the sheets hanging on the clothesline, invented stories about princesses and dragons. In the neighborhood, we had friends. Gerald from the grocery store, a freckled boy who could whistle like a bird. Matilda from the bakery, who always had a piece of cake hidden for us. Teresa, the seamstress's daughter, who taught us to braid our doll's hair. We were an inseparable group, the kind that forms in small towns where everyone knows each other by name. At night, before bed, I would tell stories to Sophia. Stories I made up on the spot, about brave girls who saved enchanted kingdoms. Sophia would listen with shining eyes, clutching her teddy bear. We slept in the same room, in separate beds, but many times she ended up in mine after a nightmare or during a storm. But I remember that around my 9th year, something began to change in our house. Dad started coming home later from work, with the smell of whiskey on his breath and a heavier mood than usual. Mom became even more silent, as if trying to become invisible. The arguments started quietly after we went to bed, but over time they got louder, impossible to ignore. "You spend more than I earn, woman," Dad would yell. "How am I supposed to handle everything alone?" Mom would respond in a rare tone of defiance that quickly faded under his gaze. On the following mornings, we would sometimes notice purple marks on her arms, which were quickly covered by long sleeves. Sophia began having more frequent nightmares. "There's a big, dark creature in my closet," she would say, trembling. I would hold her tight and promise that nothing bad would happen to her as long as I was there. A promise that, years later, would be painfully tested. I remember a specific day when I was 11 and Sophia 6. It was Sunday, a day for special lunch with roast chicken and mashed potatoes. We were all at the table when Sophia accidentally knocked over a glass of grape juice. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth that Mom had just ironed. There was a terrible silence, as if time had frozen. Dad looked at Sophia with those deep-set eyes, now flashing with anger. He raised his heavy hand, and I, without thinking, placed myself in front of my sister. "It was an accident," I said, with a courage I didn't know I had. His hand stopped in midair, trembling. "Both of you, to your room. Now," he said through clenched teeth. We spent the rest of the day locked up, hungry, but together. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would always protect my little sister, no matter the cost. That incident was just a sign of what was to come in the following years. Like raindrops announcing a storm, small moments of tension began to accumulate. Dad spent more and more time watching Sophia with a look that gave me chills. He never looked at me that way. It was a look I didn't understand at the time, but that my body recognized as dangerous, like an animal's instinct sensing a predator approaching. It was during this time that Sophia began to become quieter, to smile less. The golden curls that once swung freely were now always tied in tight braids, at Mom's insistence. "A proper girl doesn't go around showing off her hair," she would say as she pulled tightly on my sister's strands. And so, between moments of simple happiness and growing shadows, we spent our childhood in Appleton, not knowing that the worst was yet to come, and that our lives would change forever when Sophia entered adolescence. But that, my dears, is a part of the story that still hurts to tell, even after so many years. The shadow grows deeper. It was in 1972, when Sophia turned 14 and I was already 19, that the shadows hovering over our house became denser, almost palpable. I had just secured a position as a nursing assistant at the small Appleton Hospital, my first real job, the beginning of my path in medicine. I was proud, full of plans, but worried too, because it meant spending less time at home, less time protecting Sophia. At that time, Sophia was blossoming into a beauty that attracted glances wherever she went. The golden curls now fell to her waist when Mom allowed them to be loose, which was rare. Her face had lost its childish features, revealing delicate traits and deep blue eyes she had inherited from our grandmother Eulalia. She was a shy girl, always with a book in hand, dreaming of becoming a teacher someday. "Laura, I don't like being alone with him," Sophia confided to me one night as I brushed her hair before bed. It was the first time she verbalized what I had feared for years. "What do you mean, Sophia? What happened?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Nothing yet," she replied softly, looking at her own hands. "But the way he looks at me. And yesterday, when you were at the hospital and Mom went to the market, he stood in my bedroom doorway, watching me change clothes. He didn't say anything, just stood there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about quitting my job at the hospital, but I knew that job was our only chance for a future, to get out of that house someday. I decided to talk to Mom the next morning. "You need to keep an eye on Dad and Sophia," I said, while helping wash the breakfast dishes. Dolores looked at me with an expression I'll never forget, a mixture of fear, guilt, and resignation. "What are you talking about, girl? Your father is a respectable man." "Mom, you know what I'm talking about." I see how he looks at her. She dropped a plate, which shattered on the cement floor. "Mind your own business, Laura. Some things are better not to see." It was like receiving a slap. At that moment, I understood that I couldn't count on my mother. She knew, or at least suspected, but had chosen the path of silence, of denial. Perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of financial dependence, perhaps because of that distorted marital loyalty that marked women of her generation. The following weeks were suffocatingly tense. I began switching my shifts at the hospital to be home whenever Dad was there. I asked neighbors to keep an eye on Sophia when I couldn't be present. I taught my sister to lock her bedroom door, to never be alone with him. One October afternoon, I arrived home earlier than usual from the hospital and found the house strangely silent. Mom had gone to visit a sick aunt in Neenah, a neighboring town, and would spend the night there. I called for Sophia, but got no response. A terrible feeling made me run to her room. The door was locked, as I had taught her. I knocked 3 times, our secret code. "Sophia, it's me. Open the door." I heard movement inside, hurried footsteps, and then the door opened just a crack. Sophia's face appeared, pale, with eyes red from crying. "What happened?" I asked, entering the room and closing the door behind me. Sophia threw herself into my arms, trembling like a leaf. "He tried to come in. He kept knocking on the door, saying he needed to talk to me, that he had a gift. I was so scared, Laura." I hugged my sister tightly, feeling a rage I had never experienced before. "Where is he now?" "He left. He slammed the front door after I wouldn't open up." That night, I pushed my bed against the door and we slept together, like we did when we were little. Sophia slept restlessly. muttering in her nightmares. I didn't close my eyes, planning what we would do from then on. The next morning, when Mom returned, I tried once more. "We need to talk about Dad's behavior with Sophia." Dolores closed her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing a blow. Then, with a firm voice she had never used with me before, she said, "This doesn't exist, what you're implying, Laura. Your father would never do such a thing. It's your imagination. Or maybe it's Sophia, making up stories for attention. She's always been like that, dramatic." "Mom!" I exclaimed, horrified. "How can you say that?" "Enough," she cut me off. "I don't want to hear any more of these slanders against your father. He works from dawn to dusk to support this house, to give you everything you need. A little gratitude would be good, instead of these absurd accusations." It was our last honest dialogue. After that day, an invisible wall rose between us, not just between me and my mother, but between the truth and what was allowed to be said aloud in that house. In the months that followed, I became almost obsessive in my vigilance. I switched shifts, invented commitments to be at home, taught Sophia to always walk with a friend, never alone. I began saving every penny I earned, dreaming of the day when we could have our own place. But then, in March 1973, I was selected for a specialized nursing course in obstetrics in Milwaukee. It was a unique opportunity that would change my career forever. It meant being away for 2 whole weeks. "I won't go," I told Sophia. "I can't leave you alone." My sister, with a maturity that surprised me, held my hands. "You have to go, Laura. It's your dream. I'll be fine, I promise. I can sleep at Matilda's house for a few days, and on the others, I'll lock the door tight." Reluctantly, I accepted. I prepared everything meticulously before leaving. I spoke with Matilda and her parents, who agreed to host Sophia for a few days. For the others, I left prepared food, detailed instructions, and made Sophia swear that she would keep the door locked at night and never, ever be alone with our father. The 2 weeks in Milwaukee were transformative professionally, but personally were torture. I called home every day from the only payphone at the hospital, but the conversations were always brief and supervised. Sophia could never speak freely. When I returned, something had changed. Sophia was different, quieter, more distant. Her eyes, once bright, seemed dull, as if looking inward, not at the world around her. I tried to talk, but she avoided the subject, said she was just tired from school exams. April turned into May, and May into June. Sophia began wearing looser clothes, refusing certain foods at breakfast, spending more time alone in the bathroom. My medical training set off all the alarms in my head, but my heart refused to accept what my mind already suspected. It was on a hot July night, when we were sharing a watermelon in the backyard, that I finally got her to talk. We were alone. Mom had gone to church, and Dad hadn't yet returned from work. "Sophia, you know you can tell me anything, don't you?" She looked at the slice of watermelon in her hands, the black seeds contrasting with the red pulp. A tear fell, mixing with the fruit's juice. "I think I'm sick, Laura," she said so softly I almost didn't hear. "What kind of sickness, Sophia?" "My belly is growing, and I don't have those days anymore, you know." The world seemed to stop spinning. I looked at my little sister, because that's how I still saw her, my little sister, no matter that she was already 15, and realized how much I had failed to protect her. "When was the last time?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, professional. "March, before you traveled." I closed my eyes, doing the mental calculation. 4 months. She was 4 months pregnant. "Sophia," I began, carefully choosing each word, "I need to know who did this to you. Please." She dropped the watermelon, hugged her own body, and began to sob. A silent cry from someone who had learned to suffer without making noise. "I can't say," she murmured through tears. "He'll hurt you too. He'll separate us." I didn't need to ask any more. I knew. I had always known, deep in my soul. The monster I feared so much wasn't a stranger in the shadows. He was at our table every night, calling himself Father. That night, while Sophia finally slept, exhausted from crying so much, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. A cold anger took hold of me, mixed with an overwhelming guilt. How did I not notice earlier? How could I leave her alone? And now, what would we do? Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. That soon, I would discover not only the extent of my father's monstrosity, but also my mother's icy complicity, and that this discovery would forever change the course of our lives. The terrible proposition. Carrying that secret in the days that followed was like walking with a huge stone tied to my chest. Each breath hurt, each thought turned to how to protect Sophia and the child growing inside her. Nobody in town could know, not just because of the shame, but because of the danger. Who would believe us against the word of August Thompson, the respected accountant of the only bank in town? A week after Sophia's confession, I decided we needed a plan. Any plan. I took time off from a shift, and we went to Crystal Falls on the outskirts of Appleton, where nobody could hear us. "We're leaving here," I said as we threw pebbles into the water. "I have some money saved. We can go to Milwaukee, or further. You can finish school there. I can find work in some hospital." Sophia looked so small sitting on that rock, hugging her own body as if trying to protect herself. "And how will we explain this?" she asked, pointing to the belly that was already showing visible signs of pregnancy. "We'll say you're a widow, that your husband died in an accident. Nobody needs to know the truth." She looked at the crystal clear water, her reflection rippling on the surface. "I'm so scared, Laura. What if he finds us? What if—" "He won't find us," I promised, with more confidence than I actually felt. "We'll go far away, very far away." We agreed that we would leave in 2 weeks, enough time for me to receive my salary and organize everything without raising suspicions. We would pack a little at a time, hide things in the false bottom of the old wardrobe we had inherited from Grandma Eulalia. But fate, always fate, had other plans. 3 days after our conversation at the falls, I returned from the hospital and found Sophia sitting on the bed, her face swollen from crying so much, a terror in her eyes that I had never seen before. "What happened?" I asked, sitting beside her and holding her ice-cold hands. "They know," she whispered. "Mom found the dresses I was letting out. She looked at my belly, then looked me in the eyes and said, 'How long?' I felt a chill run down my spine. And what did you answer?" "The truth, that I'm almost 5 months pregnant." Sophia swallowed hard. She didn't ask who the father was, Laura. She didn't ask. That absence of a question said everything. Dolores knew, or at least suspected, and didn't want to confirm what she already feared. She preferred convenient ignorance to the unbearable truth. What did she do after that? She left the room without saying anything. I heard her crying in her room. Then she left and didn't come back. That was this morning. I hugged my sister tightly. "Don't worry, we'll move up our plan. Tomorrow we'll start to—" The bedroom door suddenly opened, and there was Dolores, red-eyed, her face marked by an expression we had never seen, a mixture of desperation and determination. "Both of you, in the living room. Now," she said in a voice that allowed no questions. In the living room, we found Dad sitting in his favorite armchair, a glass of whiskey in hand, his face unreadable. Dolores gestured for us to sit on the couch, and she stood beside her husband. "Sophia is expecting a child," Dolores announced, as if it were news to everyone in the room, including the child's own father. "Almost 5 months." August took a long sip, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face, who kept her head down. "And who is the father?" he asked, with a calmness that froze my blood. The silence that followed was so dense it seemed to have its own weight. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. "Some boy from school, obviously," Dolores answered, breaking the silence. "It doesn't matter. What matters is what we're going to do now." It was at this moment that I realized My mother was creating an alternative story, a fiction that everyone could pretend to believe, to go on with their lives without facing the horror of the truth. "And what do you suggest we do?" asked August, turning to Dolores with an almost amused expression, as if it were all a macabre game. "I have a cousin in Denton, Texas," Dolores began, looking at some point on the wall, avoiding everyone's eyes. "We can send Sophia there until the child is born. We'll say she went to take a course, learn sewing, something like that. Then she comes back, without the baby." "And what happens to the child?" I asked, unable to contain myself in the face of that cold plan. It was August who answered, with a smile I'll never forget. "There are couples who would pay well for a healthy baby. No questions, no paperwork." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. It wasn't just the horror of the abuse, it was the realization that they were planning to sell the child, their own blood, as if it were merchandise. "Dolores has a friend who knows people in Dallas," August continued, now looking directly at Sophia. "Rich people who can't have children. They would pay very well for a newborn. Enough for us to buy that piece of land on the outskirts of town, build a better house." I looked at my mother, waiting, praying to see some sign of hesitation, of humanity, but her face was empty, resigned. At some point, she had decided that this was the price to pay for peace in her home, sacrificing not just her daughter, but also her grandchild. "No," said Sophia, so softly we almost didn't hear. It was the first word she had uttered since we entered the room. "What did you say?" asked August, leaning forward. Sophia raised her face, tears flowing freely, but her eyes firm. "I won't give up my child." August suddenly stood up, knocking over the glass that shattered on the floor. "Your child! Your child!" he shouted, taking a step forward. "You think you have a choice, girl? You think you can decide anything in this house?" I placed myself between them, pushing Sophia behind me. "Don't touch her." "You shut up!" he roared, pointing his finger at me. "Always sticking your nose where it's not wanted, always thinking you're in charge of something." "You're in charge of nothing," Dolores intervened, holding August's arm. "Calm down. The neighbors will hear." He took a deep breath, straightened his shirt, regaining control. When he spoke again, his voice was low but as sharp as a razor. "Listen well, both of you. This is decided. Sophia goes to Denton next week. The child will be placed with a family that can take care of it, and you two will thank me for not kicking both of you out of this house right now." "And if we refuse?" I asked, feeling a surge of desperate courage. The smile returned to August's face, cold as death. "Then both of you can go on the street. Without money, without references, without anything. Good luck explaining to the whole town why you were kicked out of home. Good luck finding work after that." That night, while Sophia finally slept, exhausted from crying, I stayed awake, planning. The money we had wasn't enough. We would need more, much more, to survive far from there, especially with a baby on the way. And we would need documents, birth certificates, things that were kept in Dad's office, locked away. In the days that followed, we lived as if in a nightmare. Dolores began preparations for Sophia's study trip. She bought fabrics to make loose dresses, wrote letters to the cousin in Denton, told the neighbors that Sophia had received a wonderful opportunity. August, for his part, made sure to constantly remind us of his power over us. "I already have an interested couple," he commented during dinner 2 days later. "Fine people. The man is a doctor. They offered an amount you couldn't even imagine." Sophia barely ate, barely spoke. She spent hours looking out the window, one hand always protectively over her belly. At night, I heard her whisper to the baby, promises that they would stay together, that everything would be fine. Meanwhile, I acted. I asked for overtime at the hospital, accepted night shifts. Every penny went into our escape fund. I talked with an older nurse, Donna, who had relatives in New York. I asked, casually, about life there, opportunities for healthcare professionals. A week before the date set for Sophia's trip, I overheard a conversation between my parents. I was returning late from a shift, and they didn't hear me come in. "The couple wants to meet her before," August was saying. "To make sure she's healthy, that she'll give them a beautiful baby." "That's not normal," Dolores replied, her voice trembling. "That's not how you do." "And since when do you understand how these things work?" He cut her off. "They're paying. They set the conditions. And it's not like we have many options, is it? Unless you want to explain to all of Appleton how your 15-year-old daughter got pregnant." I climbed the stairs silently, my heart pounding. Entering the room, I found Sophia awake, sitting on the edge of the bed. "What is it?" she asked, seeing my expression. "We have to leave, now, tonight." "But our plan was next week. You said we needed more money and—" "We don't have any more time," I said, pulling a suitcase from under the bed. "He wants you to meet the couple who want the baby. Tomorrow, maybe." Sophia turned pale, one hand instinctively flying to protect her belly. "I won't let them take my child," she whispered, a fierce determination in eyes that had always been so sweet. That night, while the house slept, we packed our bags in absolute silence. Just the essentials: some clothes, the documents I managed to steal from Dad's office, the money we had saved. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. At 3 a.m, we left the house through the back door. The Appleton sky was starry, the cold August air cut like a razor. Sophia carried only a small bag and the teddy bear from her childhood, now worn by time and love. I carried the suitcase with our belongings and the uncertain future that awaited us. We walked through the sleeping town to the bus station. The first bus would leave at 5 a.m, to Milwaukee. From there, we would take another to New York, to the home of a distant cousin of Donna's, who had agreed to shelter us for a few weeks. Sitting on the cold bench of the deserted bus station, waiting for dawn, Sophia rested her head on my shoulder. "I'm scared," she confessed, "but also feeling free for the first time." I held her hand, feeling the slight tremor of her fingers. "We'll be fine," I promised. "You, me, and the baby. We're going to build a new life far from here. A life where no one will ever hurt you again." When the bus finally arrived, its headlights cutting through the dawn fog, I felt a mixture of terror and hope. We were leaving behind everything we knew, but also everything that hurt us. It was a leap into the dark, but it was our only chance. "Last call for Milwaukee," announced the impatient driver. I held Sophia's hand firmly, and we took the steps that would change our lives forever. Little did we know that years later we would look back at that night as the true beginning of our lives. The night we stopped being victims to become survivors. A new beginning. That cold August dawn would mark our lives forever. The bus rattled on the road that connected Appleton to Milwaukee, and every mile we left behind seemed to lighten the weight on our shoulders. Sophia slept with her head against the window, one protective hand on her belly. I, however, couldn't close my eyes. My mind was buzzing with practical concerns. How long would our money last? Where would we stay until we could reach Donna's cousin's house in New York? What if our parents came after us? Sophia would need medical care. The baby would be born in a few months. How would we register the child? So many questions without answers. We arrived in Milwaukee around noon. The bus station was teeming with people, a shocking contrast to quiet Appleton. Sophia, who had never left our hometown, looked around with a mixture of fascination and fear. "What now?" she asked, holding my hand tightly. "Now we need to find a place to stay tonight. Tomorrow morning, we'll catch another bus." We found a simple boarding house near the bus station. The owner, Mrs. Sullivan, a gray-haired lady with kind eyes, looked curiously at Sophia and her now visible belly, but didn't ask questions. She just charged for a small room with 2 twin beds. That night, while Sophia slept, I went out to call from the public phone on the corner. I called the number Donna had given me, hoping to confirm our arrival for the next day. "Hello, "May I speak with Mrs. Neely? This is Laura, Donna's niece from Appleton." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then a male voice answered, "There's no Neely here. I think you dialed the wrong number." My heart froze. I tried 2 more times with the same result. The number Donna had given me was wrong, or worse, she had deceived me. I returned to the room feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. We had nowhere to go. We were alone in a big city, with money for perhaps 2 weeks, and Sophia pregnant at almost 5 months. The next morning, I told my sister the truth. "The number is wrong. I couldn't talk to Donna's cousin." Sophia looked at me with eyes wide with fear. "What are we going to do now?" Before I could answer, someone knocked at the door. It was Mrs. Sullivan, bringing a simple breakfast on a tray. "Excuse the intrusion," she said, placing the tray on the small table in the room. "But I noticed you arrived yesterday with almost no luggage, just that little suitcase. And the young lady," she indicated Sophia's belly, "seems to need a good breakfast." I thanked her, not knowing what to say. Mrs. Sullivan sat on the edge of one of the beds. "Look, it's none of my business, but I've seen many girls like you, running from something or someone. If you need a place to stay longer, I can make a special price. I have a little room in the back, simpler, but it's yours for as long as you need." It was as if an angel had appeared in our path. That same day, we moved to the back room, actually an old storage room transformed into a bedroom, with a small window and a tiny bathroom. But for us, it was a palace. It was safety. In the days that followed, we began to create a new routine. I got a job at a nearby pharmacy, thanks to my experience as a nursing assistant. The owner, Mr. Gaines, was a bald, pot-bellied gentleman with thick, tortoise-shell glasses, who didn't mind when I explained I needed to help my widowed sister. Sophia stayed at the boarding house during the day, helping Mrs. Sullivan with light tasks, folding sheets, organizing the pantry, answering the phone. In exchange, we received a discount on rent and 3 daily meals. For almost 2 weeks, I believed we had made it, that we were safe, that we could rebuild our lives right there in Milwaukee. Until one sultry September afternoon, I returned from work and found Sophia sitting on the bed, her face pale, her eyes red from crying so much. "What happened?" I asked, running to hug her. "He was here," she whispered, trembling like a leaf. "Dad, he came looking for us." I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. "How did he find us?" "Mrs. Sullivan didn't let him in. She said she didn't know anyone with our names, but I saw him through the window, showing our pictures to people on the street." That night, we didn't sleep. We stayed up planning our next move. We couldn't stay in Milwaukee. It was the first place our parents would look. We needed to go further, somewhere no one would think to look for us. "I heard about a town in Maryland," commented Mrs. Sullivan when we explained the situation. "Frederick, I have a niece who lives there. It's far, very far, and they have a new hospital needing people in health care." It was our only chance. The next morning, with the little money we had saved and some that Mrs. Sullivan insisted on lending us, we bought tickets to Baltimore. From there, we would take another bus to Frederick. The journey was long and exhausting. Sophia, now almost 6 months pregnant, suffered from the heat and the rough roads. We arrived in Frederick 2 days later, exhausted, hungry, but hopeful. Mrs. Sullivan's niece, Ellie, welcomed us into her simple home near downtown. She was a young woman, not much older than me, with an easy smile and kind eyes. Her husband, Jack, worked on offshore oil platforms, and she seemed happy to have company during his long absences. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, showing us the small but clean room we would share. "I just ask that you help me with the household chores." In the days that followed, I tried to find work at the so-called new hospital, but I discovered that new was a relative term. The hospital was under construction and would only open the following year. I did, however, secure a position as an assistant at a private clinic thanks to my experience in Appleton. We began to adapt to life in Frederick. The warm climate, so different from the cold of Wisconsin's mountains, the Maryland accent that sometimes made us smile, the smell of the bay that came with the afternoon breeze. Gradually, our hearts began to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, we had managed to escape. Until, on an October night, Sophia woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. "What happened?" I asked, turning on the lamp. "A nightmare," she answered, trembling. "I dreamed that he found us, that he took the baby away." I sat beside her, stroking her hair. "It was just a dream, Sophia. We're safe here. No one will find us. No one will take your son." She nodded, but her eyes said something else. The fear had never completely left us. It had just hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The next morning, Sophia couldn't get out of bed. She had a high fever, abdominal pains, and slight bleeding. I panicked. "We need to take her to a doctor," said Ellie, concerned. "It could be something with the baby." The only functioning hospital was in Winchester, almost an hour away. Jack, who luckily was home that week, took us in his blue Volkswagen Beetle. The trip was a nightmare. Every bump in the road made Sophia moan in pain. At the hospital, the doctor on duty, Dr. Ignatius, an elderly gentleman with a white beard and gentle hands, examined Sophia carefully. "Her blood pressure is very high," he explained, with a worried frown. "And there are signs that the placenta might be detaching. We'll need to keep her hospitalized." "Will she lose the baby?" I asked, with my heart in my throat. "We'll do everything we can to prevent that. But I need to be honest, the situation is delicate. How far along is she in the pregnancy?" "Almost 6 months," I replied. He nodded gravely. "If the baby is born now, the chances are small. We need to keep it in there as long as possible. Every day counts." Sophia was hospitalized. I slept in a chair beside her bed, leaving only for quick showers in the hospital bathroom. Dr. Ignatius came to see her twice a day, always with an encouraging smile, even when the tests showed no improvement. "You're a warrior," he would say to Sophia, checking her blood pressure, "and your baby is too. You're fighting together." It was during those days of anguish that I made my decision. If we got through this, if Sophia and the baby survived, I would become a doctor. Not just a nurse, a doctor, an obstetrician. I would dedicate my life to helping women bring their children into the world safely and with dignity, something that was almost stolen from my sister. On the 7th day of hospitalization, I woke up to Sophia squeezing my hand tightly. "Laura," she whispered, with an expression I will never forget, a mixture of terror and determination. "He's here." "Who?" I asked, still groggy from sleep. "Dad. I saw him. In the hallway, talking to a nurse. He found us." My blood ran cold. "Are you sure? Maybe it was someone who looked like him." "It was him," she insisted, grabbing my arm tightly. "I'm sure. And he asked for my room. I heard my name." I ran to the door and peeked through the peephole. The corridor was empty, except for a nurse arranging a medication cart. I returned to Sophia, trying to stay calm. "Listen, even if it is him, he can't do anything. We're in a hospital, there are people everywhere." "You don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her pale face. "If he found us, he'll take my child. He'll sell my baby." At that moment, I understood that Sophia was right. It didn't matter how many miles we had traveled, how many new identities we tried to create. August Thompson wouldn't give up. It wasn't just the mistake he wanted to hide, or the shame he wanted to avoid. It was the money, the deal he had made, the promise he had to keep. "We have to get out of here," said Sophia, trying to get out of bed. "No," I exclaimed, gently pushing her back. "You can't move. The baby—" "If we stay, there will be no baby," she replied, with frightening clarity. "He'll take him as soon as he's born. You know that." She was right, and that certainty was like a stone in my stomach. But I also knew that if Sophia left that hospital, she could lose the baby, or worse. "I'm going to talk to Dr. Ignatius," I decided. "I'm going to tell him the truth, the whole truth." Sophia grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with fear. And if he doesn't believe us? And if he calls the police? We're minors, Laura. They can force us to go back. We have to trust someone, I replied, feeling the weight of that decision. And Dr. Ignatius seems to be a good man. It's our only chance. That afternoon, when the doctor came for his visit, I asked to speak with him privately. In his small office, with trembling hands and a choked voice, I told everything. About the abuse, the pregnancy, the macabre plan to sell the baby, our desperate escape, and about having seen our father there, at the hospital, looking for us. Dr. Ignatius listened to everything in silence, his face increasingly grave. When I finished, he remained silent for a time that seemed endless. "Do you understand what you're telling me?" he finally asked. "These are very serious accusations." "I know that," I replied, wiping away tears. "But it's the truth, and if you don't help us, my sister and my nephew will—" He raised his hand, interrupting me. "I believe you." Those 3 words, "I believe you," were like a balm to my wounded soul. For the first time since we discovered Sophia's pregnancy, someone who wasn't one of us 2 was on our side. "You can't leave the hospital," he continued. "Sophia needs medical care, the baby too. But I can transfer her to a private room in another wing. We'll use another name in the registry, and I'll designate only trusted nurses to care for her." It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "You would do that for us?" "I do this for any patient in danger," he replied firmly. "Especially when it comes to protecting a child. 2 children, actually. Your sister is still one despite the pregnancy." That same night, Sophia was transferred to a room on the top floor, in the special treatments wing. In the medical record, she became Mary Allen, a patient with preeclampsia. Only 3 nurses were authorized to enter the room, all instructed by Dr. Ignatius himself. 2 days later, while I slept in the armchair next to Sophia's bed, the door to the room opened silently. I woke up with a start, my heart pounding. It was Dr. Ignatius, his face grave. "He's here," he said softly. "At the reception, showing pictures of you 2, saying you're his runaway daughters. He says the younger one has mental problems and needs specialized treatment." Sophia, who had also woken up, began to tremble violently. "He's going to find me," she whispered in panic. "He's going to take my baby." "He won't," guaranteed Dr. Ignatius. "No one in this hospital is going to reveal where you are. But we have a bigger problem. Sophia's blood pressure is rising again. The stress is worsening her condition." As if in response to his words, Sophia put her hands on her belly with a moan of pain. "It hurts," she murmured. "A lot." What followed was the longest night of my life. Sophia went into premature labor. The baby was coming, 3 months before the expected time. Dr. Ignatius decided not to take her to the conventional delivery room, fearing that August might see her. Instead, he transformed that private room into a small surgery room. "The baby is in distress," he explained after examining Sophia. "We're going to need to do an emergency C-section." Sitting in the hallway while they prepared Sophia for surgery, I felt like I was living a nightmare. Outside that hospital, our father was looking for us with a false story and terrible plans. Inside, my sister was fighting for her life and that of her child. And I, in the middle of all this, had never felt so powerless. One of the nurses, Claire, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, sat beside me. "Do you believe in God, girl?" she asked, holding my hand. I nodded, unable to speak. "Then let's pray. Because your sister and that baby are going to need all the help they can get." The surgery lasted 2 hours that seemed like an eternity. When Dr. Ignatius finally left the room, his apron was stained with blood, and his face showed exhaustion. "Sophia is stable," he said, removing his mask. "She lost a lot of blood, but she'll recover." "And the baby?" I asked, with a trembling voice. There was a heavy silence before he answered. "It's a boy. Very small, less than 2 pounds. He's struggling to breathe." Will he survive?" Dr. Ignatius put a hand on my shoulder. I can't promise that. The next 48 hours will be critical. We did everything we could. Now it depends on his strength. The baby, whom Sophia would later name Gabriel, was placed in an improvised incubator. He was so small he could fit in the palm of my hand, with skin as thin as paper, almost translucent, and a network of bluish veins visible throughout his body. A tiny tube helped him breathe, and wires connected him to monitors that beeped constantly. Sophia, still under the effect of anesthesia, couldn't see her son in the first hours. When she finally woke up, weak and confused, the first thing she asked was, "My baby?" "It's a boy," I replied, holding her hand. "He's fighting, Sophia. He's small, but he's strong." She tried to get up, desperate to see him. "I need to be with him. If Dad finds him—" "No one is going to find him," I promised. "Dr. Ignatius placed a security guard outside the room where he is, and you can't get up now. You just had surgery." The next morning, a nurse brought disturbing news. August was still at the hospital, now claiming to be the grandfather of the premature baby that had been born the night before. Somehow, he had discovered about Sophia's delivery. "He's demanding to see his grandson," explained the nurse. "He says he has legal rights." Dr. Ignatius, who had spent the entire night monitoring Gabriel, made a radical decision. "We're going to transfer the baby and Sophia to another hospital. I have a colleague in Baltimore at Mercy Hospital. He can receive them today." "And what about my father?" I asked, terrified by the idea of an encounter. "We're going to distract him. We'll say there were complications and that the baby didn't survive. It's the only way to make him give up." It was a risky plan, but our only chance. That afternoon, while August waited at the reception, Sophia and Gabriel were placed in an ambulance at the back of the hospital, bound for Baltimore. I would accompany them in a separate car, driven by Dr. Ignatius himself. Before we left, the doctor personally went to give the news to August. I watched from afar, hidden behind a door, as my father received the information that his grandson, actually his son, had died shortly after birth. I saw no sadness on his face. I saw calculation. I saw concern about the deal he had made and now could not fulfill. And when he asked about the body, to give a dignified burial, I saw the lie in his eyes. He wanted proof. He wanted to make sure. "The body has already been sent to the city morgue," Dr. Ignatius replied with a conviction that impressed me. "It's the standard procedure in cases of neonatal death. The mother is sedated, in a state of shock. It would be better to come back tomorrow." August hesitated, clearly suspicious. But he had no way to challenge a doctor in his own hospital, especially about procedures he didn't know. As he walked away, reluctantly, Dr. Ignatius joined me in the back hallway. "Let's go," he said urgently. He didn't completely believe it. He'll be back, and with authorities this time. The trip to Baltimore was a tension-filled nightmare. The ambulance went ahead of us, carrying Sophia, still weak from surgery, and Gabriel, fighting for each breath in his portable incubator. With every bump in the road, I held my breath, imagining the impact on my nephew's tiny body. "He'll make it," said Dr. Ignatius, as if reading my thoughts. "I've seen smaller babies than him survive. Medicine has advanced a lot in this area." We arrived at Mercy Hospital in Baltimore in the early evening. Dr. Jackson, a college friend of Dr. Ignatius, was already waiting for us with a prepared team. Gabriel was immediately taken to the neonatal ICU and Sophia to a private room, under a false name again. In the days that followed, I lived between Sophia's room and the ICU, where Gabriel fought for his life. Each time the monitor indicated a drop in the baby's heart rate, each time the doctors rushed to the incubator, I felt as if my own heart stopped. A week after the birth, when Gabriel had just completed 7 days of life, Dr. Jackson called me for a conversation in his office. "Laura, I need to be honest with you," he began, with a grave expression. "Gabriel has a serious lung infection. The antibiotics aren't working as we expected." I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. Is he going to die? I'm not saying that, replied the doctor carefully. But you need to be prepared for the possibility. And we need to discuss whether we should tell Sophia now, in her current state. Sophia was still recovering from the cesarean, with severe anemia due to blood loss. The doctors feared that an emotional shock could cause a dangerous relapse. Don't tell her, I decided, after a moment of reflection. Not yet. Let me stay with Gabriel. If the worst happens, I want at least one of us to be with him. That night, I received special authorization to stay in the neonatal ICU. Sitting next to Gabriel's incubator, I watched his small chest rise and fall with difficulty, his tiny fingers occasionally moving as if trying to grab something. "Hello, Gabriel," I whispered, placing my hand on the side of the incubator. "I'm your Aunt Laura. I know you don't know me yet, but I want you to know that we already love you very much. Your mom is anxious to meet you, to hold you in her arms. You have to fight, understand? You have to be strong for a little bit longer." The hours passed slowly. The alarms went off twice during the night, bringing nurses running. On both occasions, they managed to stabilize him. The third time, however, was different. The monitor started beeping frantically. The oxygen saturation was dropping rapidly. An entire team entered the room, pushing me aside. "Pressure dropping. Oxygenation at 70%. Starting resuscitation procedure." I watched, paralyzed, as they worked on the tiny body. A doctor performed chest compressions with just 2 fingers, so small was Gabriel's chest. A nurse adjusted the ventilator, increasing the oxygen flow. For 20 minutes, they fought to bring him back. 20 minutes that seemed like an eternity. And then, when I had already lost all hope, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the steady and regular beep of the heart monitor. "He's back," announced the doctor, exhausted. "I don't know how, but he's back." That dawn, sitting beside the incubator, I made 2 promises. The first was to Gabriel. "I will take care of you and your mother for the rest of my life. No one will ever hurt you again." The second was to myself. "One day, I will understand all of this. I will learn to save lives like yours. I will become the kind of doctor who protects children and mothers, who fights for them when no one else does." Gabriel survived that critical night, and then the next one, and the following one. Each day was a small victory. Each gram he gained, each improvement in his tests, a miracle. 1 month after his premature birth, Sophia was finally able to hold him in her arms for the first time. Gabriel was still connected to monitors and tubes, but he was strong enough for a brief kangaroo, the skin-to-skin contact that strengthens the bond between mother and child. Seeing my 15-year-old sister, still a child herself, holding her son with so much love and protection, was the most powerful image I had ever witnessed. At that moment, I knew we had made the right choice in running away. That, despite all the suffering, all the difficulty, we had interrupted a cycle of abuse and horror. Gabriel would be loved, Sophia would be protected, and I would be the fortress they both needed, a promise I kept for my entire life. Rebuilding our lives. Gabriel stayed in the neonatal ICU at Mercy Hospital in Baltimore for 3 months. They were days of anguish interspersed with small victories. The first day without the respirator, the first feed at Sophia's breast, the first complete pound in weight. Each milestone was celebrated as a battle won in a war that, gradually, we began to believe we could win. During this time, Sophia and I took turns beside the incubator. She spent the days with her son, learning to care for such a fragile baby, to interpret every change in his behavior. I worked at night as an assistant in the hospital itself, thanks to a recommendation from Dr. Jackson, and stayed with Gabriel during the dawn hours. It was during these silent nights, watching the monitors that recorded my nephew's vital signs, that my decision to become a doctor strengthened. I absorbed every piece of information, observed every procedure, asked endless questions to the doctors and nurses who cared for Gabriel. "You have a vocation for this," commented Dr. Emily, the neonatologist who was following Gabriel. You have the clinical eye and the compassion needed. In January 1974, when Gabriel was finally discharged, we faced a new reality. We had survived the worst, but what now? Where would we go? How would we build a life? Sophia was only 15, I was 20, and we had a baby who still needed special care. It was Dr. Emily who offered us a solution. She had a sister, Madeline, who lived in Springfield, Virginia. Madeline was the principal of a school and had been a widow for several years, living alone in a house too big for one person. She always wanted children but never managed to get pregnant, explained Dr. Emily. Since her husband died, she lives practically for the school. I'm sure she would love your company and could help with the baby while you work or study. The offer seemed too good to be true. A house in a distant city where our parents would hardly find us, and a person willing to help us without asking too many questions. Why would she do this for us? I asked, suspicious after so many disappointments. Doctor. Emily smiled kindly. Because I asked, and because Madeline knows how to recognize good people when she sees them. Besides, she's been alone for a long time. You would be doing her a favor too. And so, in February 1974, we set off for Springfield. Me, Sophia, and Gabriel, now almost 4 months old, but still so small he looked like a newborn. In our suitcase, besides the few clothes we had, we carried fake documents that Dr. Sao Jackson obtained through contacts at the hospital, our only protection against the possibility of being found. The journey was long and tiring, with 3 transfers and constant stops to care for Gabriel. When we finally arrived at the Springfield bus station, it was late at night. Madeline was waiting for us on the platform, a tall, slim woman with gray hair tied in a severe bun, but with kind eyes that lit up when she saw Gabriel. So this is the little warrior, she said, leaning over the bundle in Sophia's arms. Welcome to Springfield. My home is yours for as long as you need. Madeline's house was an old building in the central part of the city, with large windows, a spacious yard, and airy rooms. It had been the residence of the former school principal, her late husband, and maintained the austere dignity of a bygone era, although Madeline made it clear that she didn't expect formalities. Here we are all family, she said, as she showed us the rooms. No ceremonies, no questions about the past. What matters is the future we're going to build. In the first months, we adapted to the new routine. Sophia took care of Gabriel full-time, still recovering herself from the traumatic birth. I got a job at the only pharmacy in town, using my experience as a nursing assistant. And Madeline, true to her word, became a kind of grandmother to Gabriel, taking care of him when we needed to go out, singing lullabies she had learned in her childhood in rural Pennsylvania. It was Madeline who first mentioned the possibility of Sophia going back to school. She's too intelligent to just stay at home, she commented one night as we had dinner. She could finish middle school at my school. I'm sure she would stand out. But what about Gabriel? Asked Sophia, hesitantly. Since the birth of her son, she hadn't been separated from him for more than a few hours. I'll take care of him in the morning, while you study, offered Madeline. And in the afternoon, when I'm at school, Laura can stay with him. Gradually he'll grow, becoming more independent, and you can do high school, maybe even college. The idea of Sophia completing her studies seemed a distant dream, but Madeline was persistent. In August of that year, 6 months after our arrival in Springfield, Sophia returned to classes. Initially, she went only half-day, always with her heart tight, calling home during breaks to check on Gabriel. But over time, she gained confidence. Her teachers soon noticed her intelligence, her thirst for learning after being away from studies for so long. Your sister has a bright future ahead, commented Madeline after the first parent-teacher conference. The teachers are impressed with her dedication. Meanwhile, my own dream was beginning to take shape. Madeline, upon learning of my desire to become a doctor, introduced me to an old friend of her husband, Dr. Elliott, a retired doctor who had been a professor at the University of Virginia Medical School. Laura has potential, she told him during a dinner at his house. She just needs guidance to take the entrance exam. Doctor. Elliot, an elderly gentleman with a white beard and vivid eyes behind golden-rimmed glasses, offered to help me with my studies. 3 times a week, after my shift at the pharmacy, I would go to his house for private lessons in biology, chemistry, physics, all the subjects I would need to master to enter medical school. "You have the necessary determination," he would say, when I became discouraged in the face of the mountain of content to learn. "And you have something that can't be taught: compassion. You'll be an excellent doctor." The months turned into years. Gabriel grew strong and healthy, with no apparent sequelae from his premature birth. He was a smiling boy, with golden curls like his mother's, and an insatiable curiosity about the world. Sophia completed middle school with exemplary grades and entered high school, now planning to take the entrance exam for education. Inspired by Madeline, she had discovered her vocation for teaching. In 1977, 3 years after our arrival in Springfield, I finally felt prepared to try the entrance exam. I enrolled for medicine at the University of Virginia, about 2 hours from Springfield. It was a risky choice. Studying far away meant less time with Sophia and Gabriel, who was already 4 years old, but it was also the fulfillment of a dream that had been born in the darkest moments of our lives. The wait for the results was agonizing. When the list of approved candidates was finally published in the newspaper, Dr. Elliot appeared at our house before breakfast, the newspaper in hand, a huge smile on his face. "You did it, girl," he exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "You're in!" The joy of that moment was etched in my memory forever. Sophia jumping with happiness, Gabriel not understanding the reason for the excitement but laughing along, Madeline discreetly wiping away tears. And me, feeling for the first time that the future we had dreamed of was really within our reach. In the 6 years that followed, I lived between 2 worlds: weekdays in Charlottesville, immersed in medical studies, and weekends in Springfield, enjoying every moment with Sophia and Gabriel. The sacrifice was great, the longing constant, but with each new subject I learned, each procedure I mastered, I felt closer to fulfilling the promise I had made beside Gabriel's incubator. Sophia, in turn, entered the School of Education at George Mason University, which allowed her to continue living at home with Gabriel. Madeline, now retired from school administration, was the foundation that kept our small family functioning, taking care of Gabriel when both of us were studying. In 1983, almost 10 years after our escape from Appleton, I graduated as a doctor. The graduation ceremony was one of the happiest days of my life. In the audience, Sophia, now 25 years old and a qualified teacher, applauded with tears in her eyes. Gabriel, a smart and energetic 9-year-old boy, watched everything with admiration. And Madeline, our savior, now a lady with completely white hair but still with the same determined gleam in her eyes, smiled with the pride of someone who sees a dream she helped build, finally realized. "What are you going to do now, Doctor?" "Laura?" asked Gabriel during the celebration dinner, fascinated with his aunt's title. "I'm going to do a residency in obstetrics," I replied, messing up his golden curls. "I'm going to learn to bring babies into the world, like you." "Like me?" he asked, confused. Sophia and I exchanged a look. We had never told Gabriel the whole truth about his birth, about who his father was. He only knew that his father had died before his birth, and that's why he had been raised by his mother and his aunt. "Yes, like you," I replied, carefully choosing my words. "You were born in a special way, remember? Before your time, needing a lot of help to survive. The doctors and nurses who took care of you inspired me to follow this path. The residency in obstetrics was intense and challenging. I chose the University of Virginia Hospital, known for its work with high-risk pregnancies, exactly the type of case that interested me, for obvious reasons. For 3 years, I lived practically inside the hospital, attending deliveries, performing surgeries, learning to deal with the most complex situations a pregnancy can present. In 1986, with the residency completed, I received an invitation that would once again change the course of our lives. Dr. Jackson, the doctor who had cared for Gabriel in Baltimore and with whom I maintained sporadic contact, called to offer me a position at the newly inaugurated Springfield Community Hospital. "We're putting together a first-rate obstetrics team," he explained. "And I immediately thought of you. It would be perfect. You could work in your area and stay close to your family." I accepted without hesitation. The idea of returning to Springfield, now as a qualified doctor, of working in the same place where I had built a new life, seemed the perfect closure to a cycle that had begun with so much pain. Sophia, who now taught at the same school where Madeline had been principal, received the news with enthusiasm. Gabriel, then 12 years old, was delighted with the idea of having his aunt nearby again. And Madeline, although already with fragile health due to advanced age, declared that now she could depart in peace, knowing that her family was reunited and safe. Madeline didn't live to see my first day as a doctor at Springfield Community Hospital. She passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks before I started my work. Her funeral gathered hundreds of former students and colleagues, testimony to a life dedicated to education and care for others. "She saved our lives," whispered Sophia as we threw flowers on the coffin. "Without her, I don't know what would have become of us." "We'll honor her memory," I replied, hugging my sister. "We'll continue the work she began, helping other people rebuild their lives, as she did with us." And that's exactly what we did. In the years that followed, I built a solid career as an obstetrician. I specialized in cases of teenage pregnancy and situations of vulnerability. Girls like Sophia had been, often victims of violence without family support. I created, within the hospital, a follow-up program that went beyond medical care, offering psychological support, legal guidance, and social assistance. Sophia, in turn, became a respected educator, eventually taking over the direction of the school where Madeline had worked for decades. Her special focus was children at risk, for whom school often represented the only safe and welcoming environment. As for Gabriel, he grew up without knowing the complete truth about his origins, at least until adolescence. We decided, Sophia and I, that he deserved to know the truth when he was old enough to understand it. On his 15th birthday, we sat down with him and told him everything: the abuse, the pregnancy, our escape, the terrible plan of our parents to sell him. It was a difficult conversation, full of tears and painful questions, but necessary. "So my father is also my grandfather?" he asked, trying to process the terrible information. "Biologically, yes," replied Sophia, with a courage that moved me. "But a father is much more than biology. A father is who loves, who protects, who teaches. You had many fathers throughout your life. Dr. Ignatius, who risked his career to save us. Dr. Jackson, who took care of you when you were so small you could fit in the palm of a hand. Dr. Elliott, who taught Laura and supported me in my studies, and you had a wonderful mother in Madeline who gave us a home when we had nothing." Gabriel absorbed that difficult truth with surprising maturity. In the days that followed, he asked many questions, wanted to know details about his premature birth, about how we had survived, but never at any moment did he blame Sophia or show shame for his origins. "You two are the bravest people I know," he said a few days later, "and one day I want to be a doctor like Aunt Laura, to help other people as you were helped." That day came. Gabriel graduated as a doctor, specialized in pediatrics, and today works by my side at Springfield Community Hospital. Together, we care for mothers and babies in vulnerable situations, offering not only medical treatment but also the hope that, with support and determination, it is possible to rebuild a life from the ashes of suffering. As for our parents, we never saw them again. Years later, through acquaintances from Appleton, we learned that August died in 1985, a victim of liver cirrhosis, a consequence of years of alcoholism. Dolores is still alive, as far as we know, living in a nursing home in Milwaukee. Sophia tried once to establish contact, sending a letter without a return address with a photo of Gabriel at his graduation. She never received a response. But the absence of reconciliation with the past doesn't diminish the fullness of our present. We built a life that, in the darkest moments of our journey, seemed impossible. We raised a boy who became an admirable man, despite the terrible circumstances of his conception. And we transformed our pain into purpose, using our experiences to help others find their own path to healing. As I told a frightened young mother just yesterday at the hospital, life can begin in the most unlikely places, in the most painful circumstances. But what matters is not how we begin, but the direction we choose to follow afterward. Looking back, moving forward, the morning sun in Springfield has a special glow. It's the first thing I notice when I open the curtains of my bedroom, in this house that I've inhabited for almost 50 years. Time passes quickly when we build a life with purpose, doesn't it? Today, at 72 years old, I look out the window at the garden that Sophia and I cultivate together. Red roses, blue hydrangeas, colorful geraniums that remind us of the wildflowers from the Appleton Mountains. Sophia always says that our garden is like our story, something beautiful that was born from difficult soil with a lot of work and patience. My daily routine begins early. Even officially retired from the hospital for 5 years, I still see some special patients in a private practice, 3 mornings a week. They are mainly high-risk pregnancies or very young girls, frightened by the responsibility that presents itself before them. For these girls, I offer more than medical knowledge. I offer the understanding of someone who has been on the other side, of someone who has already felt the same fear. "You're different from other doctors," a 16-year-old told me last week, after a difficult consultation where she revealed that her baby's father was a married man who now denied paternity. "It's like you can read my thoughts, like you already know what I'm feeling before I even say it." I smiled at her, holding her trembling hands. "Each story is unique," I replied. "But the fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of being alone, these feelings I know well. And I can guarantee that no matter how difficult it seems now, you'll find strength you didn't even know you had." On days when I don't see patients at the office, I dedicate myself to the project I founded almost 2 decades ago, New Dawn House, a shelter for pregnant women in vulnerable situations. It's a welcoming space on a small property on the outskirts of Springfield, where we offer not only temporary housing, but also professional training, psychological support, and complete medical care. Many of the young women who pass through there are now successful professionals, nurses, teachers, social workers, and some return as volunteers, completing a cycle of healing and giving back. Sophia, now 67, remains active even after retiring from school administration. She created a literacy program for adults that operates on the premises of New Dawn House, allowing young mothers to continue their studies while receiving support for their babies. My sister, who once had her own education so brutally interrupted, found her greatest fulfillment in the education of others. As for Gabriel, my dear nephew, today he is a 52-year-old man, a respected pediatrician in the city and region, married to Marianne, a nurse he met during his medical residency. They have 3 children, Lucas, 25, also a medical student, Helena, 22, studying psychology, and the youngest Miguel, 16, who hasn't yet decided his vocation but already shows talent for the arts. Gabriel knows the whole truth about his origins, but that has never prevented him from building his own identity, his own story. We are defined by the choices we make, not by the circumstances of our birth, he always tells his children. It's a lesson he learned early and carries as a life motto. On Sundays, our most precious family tradition has remained unchanged for decades. Lunch on the back porch under the shade of the blueberry bush we planted when we arrived at this house. The large wooden table, made by Madeline's late husband and preserved with care, accommodates the whole family, Sophia and I, Gabriel and Marianne, the 3 grandchildren, and occasionally close friends who have become part of our chosen family. At these gatherings, there is always music. Lucas plays guitar like nobody else, stories being shared, and much, much laughter. Sophia prepares her famous chicken with sweet corn casserole, a recipe she learned from Madeline and perfected over the years. I'm responsible for dessert, usually a bread pudding or a compote of seasonal fruits. The young ones bring their news, their dreams and plans for the future, while we, the older ones, listen with hearts full of gratitude for having made it this far. Sometimes, when lunch is over and the afternoon advances lazily, Sophia and I sit alone on the porch, observing the family's movement in the garden. In these moments, we don't need words. A look, a smile, a handshake is enough to communicate what we feel. The journey we shared created between us a bond that transcends even the strong tie of sisters. It was worth it, Sophia whispered in one of these moments a few weeks ago. Even with all the pain, all the fear, it was worth it. I nodded, watching Gabriel play with his youngest grandson, the same golden curls glistening in the sun. Worth every minute. My relationship with God has also transformed over the years. From the initial anger and incomprehension, how could a God of love allow so much suffering? I moved to a mature faith that finds purpose even in the most painful experiences. I attend the small church near home, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. And when I pray, I thank not only for the obvious blessings, but also for the difficult paths that brought me here. A few weeks ago, I received a letter that made me reflect deeply on our journey. It was from a young woman who passed through New Dawn House almost 10 years ago, pregnant at 15, rejected by her family with nowhere to go. Today, she is an obstetric nurse working at a public hospital in Richmond. She wrote to tell me that she named her second daughter after me. Laura, you taught me that our past doesn't determine our future, the letter said. That we can transform our wounds into wisdom, our pain into compassion for others. I hope my little Laura grows up with the same strength and determination I saw in you. That letter made me cry. Not from sadness, but from a deep joy in knowing that our story, mine, Sophia's, Gabriel's, continues to reverberate, touching other lives, creating waves of transformation that go beyond what we can see. Sometimes I think of Appleton, of the house on Maple Street, of the girl I once was. I think of the long road we've traveled since that cold August dawn, when we left everything behind with just one suitcase and the desperate hope for a better future. We never returned to that city, not even for a visit. Some places are better left in the pages of the past, but Appleton is not just a place of pain in my memories. It's also where I learned the strength of true family bonds, where I discovered that a sister's love can move mountains, where the determination that brought me here was born. Like the precious stones that give name to jewels, something valuable emerged from the dark depths of our experience. Now, in the twilight of life, I feel a peace that seemed impossible in the sleepless nights of youth. It's not a peace that comes from the absence of challenges. My body feels the weight of age. I've lost dear friends over the years, and the world out there is still full of injustices that outrage me. But it's a peace that comes from the certainty that we did the best we could with what life gave us. That we chose love instead of bitterness, hope instead of despair, building instead of destruction. And in the end, isn't that what we all seek? Not just to survive life's storms, but to learn to dance in the rain, to find rainbows where others see only dark clouds, to transform scars into marks of a battle won. This is the story I tell my youngest patients when I see in their eyes the same fear I once saw in Sophia's eyes. I don't tell the dark details, of course, but I share the essence. That even from the most desperate situations, a luminous future can be born if we have the courage to take the first step, to seek help, to believe that we deserve more than the destiny others tried to impose on us. Here in Springfield, in the house that Madeline left us and that we expanded over the years, we found not just refuge, but a true home. A place where we created deep roots, where we wrote a new story, no longer defined by trauma, but by healing, not by what was taken from us, but by what we built together. And if there's a lesson I've learned in my 72 years of life, it's that the power to start over is always within our reach. That it's never too late to rewrite our story, to transform pain into purpose, to choose light even after the longest darkness. My dear friends, we've reached the end of this journey I've shared with you. A story I've carried in my heart for so many years, but that today serves as a beacon of hope for those who need it. I've learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start anew each day. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. Even when we held Gabriel in that incubator, so small and fragile, there was a flame of hope that refused to be extinguished. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. My story isn't about what was done to me, but about how I chose to respond. For those going through difficult times, know that you're not alone. In every place, there are people ready to help, just as Dr. Ignatius, Dr. Emily, and our dear Madeline appeared in our path when we needed them most. Now, my loves, I need to ask something important. If this story touched your heart, if you believe other people need to hear this message of hope, subscribe now to the channel and turn on the notifications. If you watched until here, leave in the comments the word baby, so I know this story touched your heart. Each comment with this word will show me how many lives we're reaching, how many hearts we're strengthening together. Do this now. Don't wait another minute. Thank you for listening to me. Remember, you are stronger than you imagine, and your future has infinite possibilities that are yet to be discovered. With all my love and hope, Dr. Laura Thompson,